There were several things in my previous experiences as a consultant and a teacher that used technology that could be very helpful for you as parents or you as teachers trying to accomplish classroom teaching at home using technology. I know that's a huge stretch. I know I can just imagine if I was a parent and I had to try to help my student, my child as a student, learn at home. And there were all kinds of preconceived notions that I would have to dump. So let me first tell you about these two incidents, and then I'll try to help you understand where I'm trying to go. So first of all, where this comes from is that I read an article online today in um, one of the emails I get as an educator. I subscribe to these email listservs, and I get things that I read just to keep up with what's happening in the profession. And the article from a newspaper or a magazine, an educational newspaper or magazine, talked about helping students collaborate online. And it was talking about younger students, but it goes for all students. So first of all, as a consultant, I remember I picked up the phone, and the voice at the other end was a teacher from a school that I had visited who was stuck with a problem, and he wanted to know what I thought about his possible solution. The problem was that he had a child in his class who was sick and couldn't come to school for weeks. And this was a long time before the present time. It was way before we had a lot of integration in technology. And he said to me, Howard, how can I bring that child into the classroom? Do you think it would be okay if I used a camera on my desk to help the student? And I said, absolutely. If you have a laptop and you have a camera that is portable, not on the laptop, but an external camera. That was before laptops had internal cameras. An external camera, you can turn the camera around on your desk so that the person on the other side can see the classmates. So much of the interaction between young people involves seeing and being with them. So he said, you want me to use a camera? And I said, absolutely. He said, do you think that will solve the problem? And I said, it won't hurt to try. This was before we had all of these other developments. A week later, he wrote back and he talked about how thrilled the child was and how thrilled the parents were because the sick child at home felt like they were part of the class. So think about that. The simple idea of a camera helps connect two students or two classrooms. Another example, I was a consultant and my school board had a project. This is also a long time ago, at the very beginnings of video teleconferencing. You can probably remember, some of you, what that was like. And and my board, the consultant I was working with, the superintendent I was working with, had collaborated with a board in England. And they were trying to figure out ways to bring the two groups together. And I talked about having the students in schools in England and the students in schools in Niagara working on the same project and then using email back and forth to collaborate one group with the other. That was when we were just starting to read about global collaboration, schools going online and collaborating with each other. At the same time, there was talk about uh, students in classrooms asking questions of the astronauts and getting responses from them through email and being able to chart the things that were going on, and students who were looking at research under the ocean and so forth. There were any number of them, and today you can find projects on just about every topic you want. So then, since we're trying to talk about using technology to collaborate, then when I was um, a instructor at Niagara University, I used Blackboard and I used discussion groups. So I would post a question for my students, and we would talk about it in the classroom face to face. And then they would go online and they would have to discuss amongst themselves responses to the questions. And they had to post 2 or 3 responses. Now, they knew who they were in the class. So they interacted in the classroom and they interacted online, but they had to use the technology to bring them together after classroom hours. I've participated in all kinds of experiments like that. I can pride myself on being a pioneer on the use of e learning, a pioneer on the use of discussion groups to bring classes together, and a pioneer in the use of classes doing research and making web pages and then sharing them with each other. But it's all about the idea of learning together, and how do you help your child get online and stay online and know that they're going to be safe. So, a further idea of this, I remember when we were just starting to see students as young as grade 3 and grade 4 sending emails. And there was an ongoing conversation about whether or not it was safe. We all know that there are dangers lurking on the internet. We all know that kids can meet all kinds of weirdos online, but that's if we don't supervise them. You have to know what you want your children to do and what they're going to try to do and how they're going to try to do it. You have a conversation, you discuss, you come to agreement. In the early days of email, we, the superintendents, the consultants, the classroom teachers, the principals, we gave the students the emails. We made sure that the students all had an email that would have, and this is the example I'm going to use, myself, it would be howard.slepkov at dsbn.niagara.ca, for an example. That's not the right address, but it's the example. And in a classroom, you can have student 1, student 2, student 3, student 4 at dsbn dot whatever. If you know your students are going online, you have to make sure that they're using emails that have their names and a correct address. There's a big difference between Mary Taylor at gmail.com and Sweet Mary at gmail.com, or Tommy Tunes at gmail.com and Tiny Terry or Tiny Tom because some names bring up the wrong kinds of ideas. So when you go online, when you encourage your child to collaborate, you have to dialogue with them and find the ways in which they communicate together. There's nothing wrong with you, parent A or teacher A, arranging for your students or your children to communicate with the students or children of teacher B and teacher C or parent B and parent C, and allowing them to exchange emails as long as they use their proper names. Allow them to go online and use Google, whatever it is, I can't think of off the top of my head, or WhatsApp and videos and all of those things. There are all those tools out there that allow people to dialogue through video and voice or video and text or whatever. But you set the ground rules. Just because people get in trouble doesn't mean you close the door. It means you consider ways to keep your child safe. I'll close with this. I remember when teachers were petrified that their kids would go browsing online. They would do Google searches and they would find what they were looking for, and they would click on a link, and then they would go someplace else and they would click on a link, and the next thing you know, parents were sure they were looking at pornography. It happens. I know it happens. But in my classroom, when my students were browsing online, I was behind them. I didn't have them sitting with the screen so that I couldn't see. I had them sitting with the screen so that I could see what they were doing all the time. And so, therefore, I could make sure they were staying on task or they were not getting into any trouble. I knew my children well enough that I knew what they were doing was legitimate. When it comes to going online and collaborating online, you need to dialogue and you need to be aware. That doesn't mean you stop and be aware of everything else but your child. You have to have confidence in them, and then you have to make sure that you're watching, not necessarily with your eyes on their screen, but you go back and forth and you're checking, because if the child knows that you're going to check on them, they will stay out of trouble. It's like being at home and telling your child before you go, telling your teenage boys or girls before you go out to a movie or to eat with friends, don't you dare touch the liquor cabinet, and then leaving it wide open. You need to leave it wide open and not say anything, but you need to be checking all the time so that when somebody does something wrong, you assume they are right. You assume they're doing good. If you're constantly assuming they're going to get into trouble, they will get into trouble because they will fulfill your expectations. If we expect our kids to succeed, they will succeed and they will do good. Keep on top of them and keep in dialogue constantly. Bye for now.